Welcome to the Irish NFL Show and welcome to our Week 9 Talking Points brought to you by Buskers on the Ball in Dublin's Temple Bar. You can check out Buskers on the Ball on Sunday evenings where they show a selection of live games and Red Zone every NFL weekend. And what a weekend of games we've just had. We had a stirring Dolphins comeback attempt that fell just short against the Chiefs in Frankfurt, where Brian and Colin were over the weekend. The Ravens convincingly won the Battle of the Birds. Josh Dobbs pulled out a storybook win for the Vikings, and CJ Stroud fired the Texans to victory in an instant classic over the Bucs. And that was just the early window. Brian, those talking points, we couldn't really start anywhere else but with Josh Dobbs. And one of my favorite moments over the weekend, never mind what happened on the field, is in the media engagement afterwards. Josh Dobbs literally had to introduce himself to the Minnesota press corps. He started off by saying, "Hi everyone, my name is Josh Dobbs," which I think obviously was partly tongue-in-cheek, but also reflected just how crazy it is. So the guy kind of arrives in Minnesota off the plane, I think, on Thursday. There's clips of him that have gone viral now, practicing his cadence with the center on the sideline just before he goes in after poor old Jaron Hall. Now, shout out to Jaron Hall here, who actually started really well.
Yeah.
He was going very, very well in his first start and got absolutely tuned trying to run the ball in, trying to stretch for the pylon. Had a two-man tackle and put him out of the game with a concussion. Josh Dobbs comes in, barely knows the names of the players around him. There's no way he can know the playbook. I think Kevin O'Connell is having to just explain to him in Annan Barry language what's supposed to be happening on every play. And from there on, bar the first drive, which was an absolute disaster, and credit to him for recovering from that. It was just amazing, just a great story.
Doing a little bit of disservice there. Bar the first drive, there was quite a few drives. Safety, 2 interceptions. But you're right. Okay, he's introduced himself to the guys after the game. He actually went up to some of the guys on the sideline and just said, "Just so I get this right, your name is X and Y." And obviously, as you said, the viral piece around the fact he's giving him the, I suppose, the signal on how he's going to snap the ball and etc. But look, it's a great storyline, and this kind of, for me, this is something Colin called weeks ago, because he was playing so well for the Cardinals, and as I said, I think we said it last week, you forget these guys are looking for the next opportunity in the league, and he's got it, and rightly so, because he's deserving of it. And look, he's come in, it's a great storyline, but it just, for me, it's still masked some of the, he's going into play on an offense where he, as you said, he knows very little in terms of the terminology. He actually went up to one of the wide receivers on the last drive, which happens to be the game-winning drive, and I said, "Do you know what this play means?" So Newman quickly tried his best to explain as best he could. So look, it's a great storyline, and for him, bearing in mind where the Vikings were, a number of weeks ago, they've gone, I think, 5-1 in the last 6 games, with the exception of their wide receiver still not being back from an IR. It's a great storyline. But for me, where are the Falcons? I know everybody's going to raving about this Josh Dobbs, but sometimes you have to take a step back and look at the other side of the coin. And Ryan Nielsen was coming in as defense coordinator, and everybody was raving about him. He's going to understand the nature of the division. He's come from the Saints. How do you know a quarterback who doesn't understand the playbook, to go and do that shit on the last drive? And Arthur Smith, and again, and also the quarterback situation there, I just don't get it, because they wouldn't go for Lamar Jackson. They said Desmond Ridder was the man. He clearly isn't the man. Tyler Heineke is not he's a breach quarterback, and he's showing interceptions. They're in a strange place for me. And there's a motorbike going somewhere in the background, so maybe it's not my house, but maybe it's a Falcons fan that want to listen to us and getting out of here. So sorry, I'm probably getting away from a Vikings great storyline, but the Falcons for me, it's a game they should have had.
And Colin, maybe before we tear apart the Falcons, who well deserve it at this stage, the Vikings, winners of 4 straight now. I mean, for all that, and I was probably one of the leaders in terms of the 3 of us here and dumping on the Vikings and how they were so lucky to go 13-4 last year, and it was all going to come apart this year. And it started off that way. They lost every 1-score game they played in, but this team has a ton of heart. And, if there were any doubters, they probably won them over at this stage. They're kind of the team, apart from the Texans, who we'll get to, that all the neutrals kind of are getting behind now, because for all the misfortune that they got another Cam Akers down with an Achilles over the weekend as well, of course, it really hasn't gone well for them in terms of, all the things you'd want to go your direction. And yet they're pulling it out. And Josh Dobbs has just become the emblem for what's possible to do when everybody's pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, I think Kevin O'Connell and the coaching staff deserve immense credit. And this, you've pointed to the injuries. At no point have they made a big deal our injuries as an excuse. It would be so easy for him to step up to the podium and to say, we're without arguably the best wide receiver in the league. We're without our QB who was playing the best football of his career. And plenty of head coaches do that. But Kevin O'Connell is super, super smart. We had the good fortune to talk to him. It was so obvious. This is a guy who thinks so deeply about the game. I think I asked him, what's the difference between a very good QB and elite QB? And he went on about a 12-minute answer, Connor, where he broke it down both physically and from a psychological standpoint about what makes the guy really good. And Josh Dobbs talked about it. And I think what Kevin O'Connell is doing and what Brian Flores is doing, and look, let's not get totally over the skis. They're going to be rough moments for the Vikings, but they are doing more with less this year. And I think it is immensely impressive. And I think people around the league and Arthur Smith need to, football is not as complicated as people want to make out. And Arthur Smith would have you believe he's the only person in the world who can understand it, and you don't watch the tape and you don't know. Well, Kevin O'Connell is the exact opposite, because it isn't that complicated. There are concepts, and there teams do certain different things with certain concepts. So there might be 16, 18, 20 different ways to run stick, but ultimately it's the stick concept. And what Kevin O'Connell and the Viking staff did was to talk Josh Dobbs through that. And yeah, you can blame some of it on the Falcons for not doing more, but the Vikings had to go out and do it, and they have shown incredible togetherness to overcome adversity this season. Everything went their way last year, but they just you see the videos of them in the locker room afterwards, and they are together, and they are immensely impressive. And I think that Kevin O'Connell should be, whatever way this ends up going, should be in contention, or at least talked about for Coach of the Year, because I think he's done a really, really great job.
Brian, you mentioned the Falcons, and as Colin was saying, football, for all that we can get into, incredible levels of complexity and detail, it is a simple game. And the Falcons, for all of the weapons at Arthur Smith's disposal in particular, and when we talk about the offensive side of the equation for them, often seem to make it difficult on themselves rather than making it difficult on their opponents. It's actually sometimes when they're doing the simple thing that they look at their most effective. We spoke about it just before we came on, how they brutalized the Vikings down the field for the go-ahead touchdown before Dobbs' heroics, ran the ball 11 times in a row. That they have the capacity to do that, and yet they seem to put the quarterback in a position to lose them games, and he's more than happy to do it for them, whoever's in the position at the moment.
Yeah, and are they utilising Bijan Robinson to the skill set in which he has? Because we saw last week in the other game when they were in the red zone, they didn't use him once, and kind of similar traits are appearing in this game. And you have to wonder. We saw Colin was there for us to see how explosive he was in Wembley. And again, sometimes you see these players and you wonder why they can't get the best out of them, because initially they come in, they start off, and he's regressed slightly. But it's the quarterback situation for me. There is ultimately where they're going wrong. There's no consistency there. Ritter has not been lived up to the hype. Taylor Heineke, I thought we'd see a bounce off him, because we saw that in Washington. We discussed on the show last week where he comes in, you get 3 or 4 really strong games from him, and then he kind of regresses back to the flaws, which is why he isn't the number one quarterback at that particular team. But again, he was immediately in, and we're showing concerns already in the fact that he was showing interceptions, but too many inconsistencies right now. And it said when you've got really effective players, it's not just Robinson, there's Algier in the backfield. It's not a ton of players. Cordell Patterson was a real kind of Swiss Army knife for them in the past. They don't seem to be utilising him. I know he didn't come back until the Wembley game, but he's back fully now. They're not even using him at the same rate.
They threw him in on a trick play on fourth down at one stage, and he got the conversion, and then he just kind of again this maddening Arthur Smith thing where he seems to want to run everything by committee, just popping. How's a player supposed to get into a groove and get momentum with just being coming in expecting to do for one play, and then you might not see action for another 3 or 4 series, depending on the whims and the vagaries of what he has in his head by way of game plan or playbook. It can't be an easy coach to play for. Colin, in any other weekend we would have started off talking about CJ Stroud, and I feel guilty even that it's taken us nearly 10 minutes to get to it, but that Josh Dobbs story was just too good to turn down. CJ Stroud broke the rookie single game passing record over the weekend, 470 yards, dropped 5 touchdowns, some incredible throws. I mean, you wondered at times, were you looking at Joe Burrow here or prime Peyton Manning, the way he, with the poise that he has and the ability to hit those back shoulder throws. Nothing seems to faze this guy. And there's a lot of teams around the league, perhaps even including my own Bears, maybe wondering what they could have done with draft picks when this guy was on the board.
Yeah, he is immensely impressive. Just over the midway point of the season, he is the runaway favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's been fantastic, and the way he goes about his business, I think, is to be commended. This is a guy who, when the S2 results came out, there were all sorts of doubts about him, and he went and there are questions about the receiving corps. But again, really good QBs elevate the receivers around them, and there's so much said about in sports and professional sports, with covering and beat reporters and others covering for teams. And over the last years, you've heard about, you need to give rookies time, and you need to give rookie head coaches time. It takes ages. Well, D'Amico Ryans and CJ Stroud are taken to the NFL like a duck to water. We saw Kevin Stefanski get to the playoffs. You can point to loads. Brian Dable last year. I was told, I had a podcast with Sean Pendergast, who is a Texans beat reporter, that came out on Sunday. And this was before the game. And he talked about how impressive CJ Stroud is, because what he looks for is weaknesses in his game. So whenever there is a weakness, he does have that Peyton Manning thing of being an absolute film nerd. He wants to see what he can work on. And I think, in fairness, I've said it over the past few weeks, I got it wrong on the Texans going back up for Will Anderson as well. I think they definitely will look at it, and there will be bumps along the road. They have the Bengals next. That's going to be tough, but they've got the Jags, but I don't think given the Jags are division rival, they won't fear them in the same way. And outside of that, it's not a murderer's row that they face in the back end of the season.
You mentioned that S2 test, which is the whole, how they're supposed to evaluate processing power. Peter King called it out in his Football Morning in America column as well, saying somebody's going to have to tear that one up and start again. Because, one of the remarkable things from this game, Brian, was the Bucs stopped blitzing Stroud after about a quarter and a half because it wasn't working. He was reading it too quickly and he was cutting them apart. They had to change the way they were defending him. That's how quickly he processes the game in week 9 of his rookie season. He's lethal, and given time and space, and even if he's not given time and space, he can make the throws. With what we thought of as being kind of a weapons poor offense, but where Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Schultz have all shown up. Schultz coming back to haunt the Bucs again over the weekend.
Yeah, and it's reflective of what you say. When you look at his numbers for the game, the first half he was 14-22 for 145 yards, which isn't shabby for the first half of a rookie. And then he goes 20 for 42 for 480 odd yards and 5 touchdowns in the second half. But the in-game adjustment, as you said, between him and D'Amico Ryans and the offensive coordinator, they look at what they've done in the first half and come out in the second half, and for them to shy away from blitzing because they were getting penetrated time and time again. There was I think a little bit of a factor as well in terms of the secondary for the Bucs was losing Dean to concussion, because he's one of their better players, and they're kind of down a few players already. So I'm not going to put it down to injury, the inefficiencies of their defense. But again, this is another one Todd Bowles will be looking at going, how is the defense getting it so wrong? Because we spoke earlier on the season about this defense is probably one of the spots in this team that would help this team challenge within the division and to give up that play. And even more disappointing is the last drive. CJ Stroud was fantastic, but they had him in a 4th and 10, and he converts for 11 yards. They were allowed to go down the field.
I don't know if you were watching it on Red Zone, but Scott Hansen had actually said, completely joking, after Mike Evans gets the go-ahead touchdown for the Bucs with 45 seconds on the clock, the way this game is gone, I fully expect CJ Stroud to drive them 75 yards down the field for the score. And he did. He's just ridiculous.
You see the celebration on the side of the field after the Bucs took the lead, and Baker Mayfield's high-fiving them. They thought they had it. They thought that was, as well as Stroud had played, this is too much for a rookie to go down and do it. And he goes and does that on them. And for Baker Mayfield, it's arguably one of his better games he's had. at the Bucs and he comes out the wrong side of it. But sometimes you just have to hold your hands up and recognize what a talent this quarterback is. And he was the second pick, and you'd wonder what the Carolina Panthers are thinking when they see the struggles which they had later on Sunday evening.
What the Cleveland Browns are thinking, though, those first round picks that went on Stroud, Anderson, and one other, plus all that guaranteed money for Deshaun Watson. Wouldn't they like to have that back?
Yeah, and just on Nick Caserio, I think we touched on it last week as well. Last year, there was just after the trade deadline, there was suggestions that he wouldn't be there even till the end of the season, and here we are a year later. And Collins rightly said they're in a, there's a potential opportunity to push on, and maybe make a late push to become a wildcard team if they don't even stay in the mix for the division, depending on the nature of these games. And like a year on, and we speak about draft strategies, and you could argue they've got this one so right, no matter what they gave up to the Cards in terms of the future picks, because right now they're going in a very good direction, and they've obviously got the head coaching, piece right as well, which is sometimes that's ultimately the biggest one as well, to get the head coach right before you even get to the draft process.
Yeah, I got to say, for all of us who lament the front office shenanigans that derail our franchises, the Texans and the Colts are giving us all hope this year. It can eventually turn around, even if you just get lucky. And we were looking at Lovie Smith winning that final game for them, and they were cursing that they didn't get the number 1 overall pick, and then CJ Stroud falls right into their laps. Colin, the Ravens over the weekend, another statement win. They dismantled the Lions a couple of weeks ago. They dismantled the Seahawks over the weekend. These are not bad teams that they've just kind of put through the blender these past couple of weeks. Is it that the Ravens are just that good, or have they exposed flaws in those two erstwhile NFC contenders?
The Ravens are that good. They are absolutely sensational. I think you can make a really valid argument that they are the best team in the NFL. What they are doing on defense is comparable only to the 2000 Ravens. That defense, they put you in a blender. The Seattle fans seem to be losing their minds about Geno. Calm down. This was against an absolute monstrous defense. I think John Harbaugh, I've criticized the Ravens, and I stick by, how did you let it get to that situation with Lamar? Why didn't you surround him with talent earlier? But anyway, the fact that they were willing to move on from Wink, the fact they were willing to move on from Greg Roman in the space of 2 years, and to bring in the guys that they did, I think he deserves immense credit, because what they are doing, again, goes against all the perceived wisdom. All the perceived wisdom is you got to have your star players on defense at edge. You got to have star cornerbacks. But for the Ravens, it's your middle linebacker and your safety, and everybody is stepping up. Can you imagine? I imagine there's got to be some tough conversations, or there already are in with the Chargers. But you're watching Kyle Van Noy go out and do that every single week. I mean, everybody is playing up to their potential right now, and I am not surprised that Lamar is playing this way. I think he has been underrated, and I think they are terrifying. I do not think anyone is going to want to play them. They should.
And one thing that particularly scared me over the weekend, on top of everything that you've just talked about, is we might have said, well, they're going to really miss J.K. Dobbins down the stretch, and then this Keaton Mitchell kid shows up and just puts up 138 yards just like that, which is not what the rest of the NFL needed to see right now. Brian, one thing that did strike me, though, with both those wins over the Lions and the Seahawks, it just exposes the fact that if your ceiling is Geno or Jared Goff, you're probably not equipped to take the Lombardi from a team like the Ravens. Like, you need someone who can pull rabbits out of hats, and neither of those guys are that guy.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll jump in on the Geno piece first, because I think it is a concern. Column's saying Seahawks fans are losing their mind because it's the consistency thing. I think we spoke about it last week, how inconsistent he was in the game against the Browns with the interceptions. He did it against the Cardinals with the interceptions. He's been doing it throughout the course of the season. And now Pete Carroll is even calling it out in the press conference after the game that, this is now a worrying concern, and where he was kind of brushing it under the carpet last week, he's now kind of gone full circle and saying, okay, this really is a concern for us. They, in particular, will probably get away for large parts of the season because their defense is quite strong, and you'd imagine against the Commanders at home on Sunday, that'd be the case. And I agree with Colin, and I agree with Chewy's in terms of where the Ravens are at. I saw a great statement today. They can beat you with the run, they can beat you with the pass, and they can beat you right now with their defense. They are essentially, playing complementary football across the league and special teams as well. If you want to throw that in, they are right now. You'd argue, but then what we need to do is be careful because we've done this 3 times this year with 2 different teams.
We killed the 49ers for starters.
We killed them. We killed the Bills before they went to London, and then we're loading it up with the Ravens. And they play the Browns this weekend. It probably will be a juggernaut defensively in this game. Which defense can hold
I heard
the most.
One of the pundits on ESPN radio over the weekend. I was stuck in the car for the second quarter of some of the games on an emergency errand, and I was listening to ESPN radio. And one of the pundits said, "I picked the Seahawks because I figure every time we hype up a team, they lose the following week. Why are the Ravens doing this?"
That has been the course this season. Sorry, Colin.
I mean, I think like there's a long way to go, but the other teams that have been hyped, I think that the pieces, like structurally, they're so good, and there aren't the questions, I think, around Lamar like there are around Brock Purdy. Lamar has won an MVP. Like, he's shown he can do this. This is a team who know how to win. The questions may start in the playoffs, right? But to me, there shouldn't be any reason. They're good enough to do it. They have been the Bengals' kryptonite. The only thing is that AFC North is a bit of a bloodbath.
Well, if the season ended today, all 4 AFC North teams would go to the playoffs. Like, I mean, we've talked again and again about how tough this division is, but the 3 teams stacked behind them on 5-3. And none of them look like mugs right now. I know we've talked about the Steelers' miraculous wins here and there, which may be slightly padding their schedule, but nobody's given any quarter in that division.
No, and then you look at the nature of who they got coming up. Like, there's very winnable games. You'd argue the Steelers are rightly favourites now to win at home against the Packers this weekend, and so they've all got these games where you could see a situation. I don't think it's never been done before. I don't think there's ever been a scenario with all 4 teams. Obviously, the playoff permutations have changed recently with the extra team. But we've seen 3, we've never seen the 4. I'd be interested to see if they can all continue to battle their way through. It's a big ask to see go forward, find their way in.
Well, Brian, we move into our second segment of Talking Points, and if we talk about playoff contention, it looks unfortunately as though the Giants won't be in that conversation after that weekend. It's terrible injury for Daniel Jones, a season-ending injury against the Raiders, which is. Unfortunately, the season was heading that way, particularly after that loss to the Jets last week. But it seems to have put a fork in it now.
Yeah, it's a bit of a catastrophe. Everything that could go wrong this season essentially has gone wrong. You look at the injury list, and it's excruciating the amount of players that have been lost. It's been lost for quite some time, and they could have been masked over the last 3 weeks by good defense performance. But on Sunday, the defense was gone back to what we saw earlier in the season. You allowed the Raiders to go 67 yards in 6 plays in the opening drive of the game, when you would expect to continue the trend of what we'd seen lately. And for Daniel Jones, I mean, the Giants played 36 quarters this season. He's only played in 10 of them, and that's spread across a number of different games where he's been in now for injuries. And I mean, there's a more broader conversation around realistically if that's the last of them. It sounds a bit harsh to be saying it like that, but the reality the NFL is not for long, and teams have to move on in different directions in the future. But the Giants, in a roundabout way, don't seem to be doing much to find another quarterback or another solution. They brought in another one today on the practice squad, which tends to think that they're going to try play tough, but ultimately lose a lot of games and focus on where they are come draft time. And yes, look, I don't know what else to say. Like, you've got, like, Colin was right. You get the bounce from Antonio Pierce coming in, but ultimately he's never coached in the league, and you're going up against a rookie quarterback. You'd still think that when you get beyond the hype and the early kind of initiation of a game, that the better team would come and win, but it wasn't to be on Sunday. And maybe the Raiders will navigate another great season like they did 2 years ago when they had an interim head coach, because they've got the Jets coming to town on Sunday Night Football. And it's not Zach Wilson's not. Yeah.
Bit of an irony there, sorry, Brian. Bit of an irony there, Colin. For as Brian mentions it kind of made me smile a little bit to think the Raiders are normally the team that lose to the rookie coach. Like, that's kind of been their trademark. They lose to the rookie coach. They lose to the undrafted free agent quarterback. They lose to the guy who was in the broadcast booth the week before. So it's probably nice for them and nice for their fans to have finally seen it go the other way with Antonio Pierce coming in. Is it unkind to say that this was a lot more about the Giants' shortcomings than it was about any sort of post-Josh McDaniels bounce, or do you see there being any prospect of the Raiders kind of picking it up here because they're still not that badly placed?
Oh, this was all about Josh McDaniels in certain respects. Like, I couldn't believe when I saw that ye had all gone Giants. This was only going one way. This Raiders team could have been playing the 72 Dolphins. They could have been playing the 07 Giants in the Super Bowl. It didn't matter. Maybe it's because I went through it.
You can't talk about the 07 Giants in the Super Bowl. Apparently, that was the last straw for Josh McDaniels' column in the locker room.
You saw the celebrations afterwards. I don't think people realize just how bad a coach, how bad a person, how horrific it is to have Josh McDaniels as your head coach. And so the freedom when you move on from him, like you saw it, like you saw in the warm, you saw Devontae Adams messing with the basketball. Like, I go back, I think it was Nate Jackson, and has that great book, Slow Getting Up, about being a journeyman pro in the NFL. And he talks about the first time that he meets Josh McDaniels, and he's traveling around the league, and he's like, "Oh my God, this guy!" There's so many stories. There's a litany. Everybody that that has had him as a head coach. Only has bad things to say about this person.
But doesn't it kind of underline the fact, again, though, for me it does at least, where people talk about the Patriot way, it is the Patriot way. It doesn't work anywhere else.
Yeah, and would it have
asterisk Mike Vrabel, obviously.
Would it have worked without Tom Brady? I mean, it was the perfect circumstances. And look, a lot of it you could possibly point to Alex Ferguson as well, like his assistants and his players haven't tended to go on to be great managers elsewhere. You're trying to capture lightning in a bottle. So yeah, you could ask all sorts of questions about Josh, and I'm sure he'll probably go off to maybe the college game for a year, and then he'll come back and somebody will give him a chance again. I will say I do think there are concerns for the Giants because they started last season on fire. They were 7-2 at the bye, and since the bye, they ended up 3-5-1, Brian, I think, in the back end of last season. It's a concern that things, and this is, I think the second half of this season is going to be interesting in terms of, for Brian Daboll. He's a very emotional coach, and that's fine when things are going well. But when you're getting on guys' backs publicly, when they're walking off the field, when things aren't going well, that's a problem. And the first murmurs started.
Yeah, you didn't need to be a professional lip reader to see what was said on the Giants sideline. It's not a good look.
There were murmurs in the locker room afterwards about, the coaches aren't listening to the players. Now, it was a murmur, and
it's only coming from the same player, Colin, and it keeps consistently coming from the same player all season, and that's McKinney. No one else.
Yeah, but Brian, they are where they are this season.
I know. It's when you say murmurs, it's one player, and he's shown his way out the door already. So,
you can't argue. Since the bye, they have not looked like the same team.
No, I agree.
They did. Yeah. So I just think you can get by, but publicly giving guys the hairdryer. And look, Brian Daboll did it week 1 in his very first NFL game. I just think you're treading a very fine line now, because you've got a QB on the hook for $47 million next year against the cap. You hope that you're picking in the top 2. I think that's realistically what the Giants probably want. But he has got to navigate this, because you're going to have Daniel Jones around next year, and you're going to want, it's an interesting situation for the Giants that they find themselves in, and he is going to need Joe Shane and others to step up there.
I don't know, Brian. I think the Bears and the Panthers are going to be playing for a tie on Thursday. The way this is going, they didn't count on the line.
Big game Thursday.
Making a run for that number 1 pick.
I'm drawn in by that game. You're going to make one quick point on the Raiders. I don't know how far it's going to take them. Like Colin right in terms of the emotional change in the dynamic, obviously moving on from Josh McDaniels. But Antonio Pierce is from Compton. He's a Raiders man. He's grown up a Raiders fan. He had all the practice squad players on the sideline for the game because essentially he says, we're all in this together. Like, this is all graphic. This is the way players will want to play for him and run through a brick wall for him. And just what you said earlier, like if they were to win at the weekend, they're plus 500. There's a lot of opportunities ahead for this team. But sometimes we see the emotional uplift immediately, and then you regress back to the form of old in the second game. So we'd be very interested to see Sunday Night Football as well. It wasn't flex, so it's a very interesting one because that game is very winnable. Let's be honest, bearing in mind how poor that Jets offense is.
Absolutely. Talking about results that might have playoff implications, we had a whole clutch of them over the weekend, and some of these we I think need to unpack in a bit better detail because there's some fascinating permutations now starting to come out. Colin, the Bengals beat the Bills, and this could prove a very important result because both teams could well end up battling for wildcard places. Browns, Bengals, Steelers are all now level on 5-3 behind the Ravens in the AFC North. It's going to be a bloodbath for those wildcard spots, assuming that the Bengals don't in fact win the division or the Bills win their division. That could be a really, really important result.
Yeah, it certainly could be, and I think the result last night, I not that I ever thought they were going to do it, but that's killed off any notion that the Jets were, I think, going to find their way in there. The Bills, it's like they have a couple of games coming up here now where it could potentially be in like. They play the Broncos and in Buffalo, and they play the Jets in Buffalo. They need to win those because after that, they have to go to Philly, they have to go to Kansas City, and then they host the Cowboys. So they have some really tough games coming up here. The Bengals, they lose Jamar Chase, but we saw in his absence the other wide receivers step up, and they've shown over the past few years, and they've shown this year, that they will find new ways, I think, to try to win as the season goes on, like going from shotgun under center. But they have some kind of tough games to come as well. Now, you have to be impressed by the fact that they have beaten the Seahawks, the 49ers, and the Bills on the trot. But those AFC North games, they will be really tough.
Ravens Bengals now is shaping up to be an absolute heavyweight bout. I mean, you got the Ravens have beaten both the Bengals and the Browns on the road. Obviously, they dropped one to the Steelers, but Ravens are probably one more key divisional win away, and that's the one they will want from having a critical tiebreaker. Never mind the win.
And just the last, for the Bengals, the last 3 games, you're on the road into Pittsburgh, right before Christmas. I mean, Mike Tomlin is going to have that team up. Then you have to play the Chiefs in Arrowhead on New Year's Eve, and then you welcome the Browns to finish out the season.
I tell you, I'm looking forward to the Steelers watch party as well, because Steelers Browns now looking like one of the better games that they could possibly have picked for that one coming up on Sunday week. Of course, Brian, you had a couple of points on the Bills.
Yeah, I think that of all the teams in the AFC, we're talking about permutations for the playoffs. I know we're coming into week 10, but I think the Bills are in the biggest jeopardy here. I know they're only a game back in the division. People say, they'll still win the division. Colin's rightly called it out in terms of the nature of some of the games they have. They're on the road in Philly, on the road in Kansas City, on the road in Miami, still to come. They've lost all 4 games. They're all 4 defeats they've had have been on the road. They lost to the Jags in London. They lost to the Bengals on the road on Sunday. They lost to the Jets in week 1, and they lost to the Patriots. And defensively, since Matt Milano and Johnson went down the team, they've no pass rush. They had I think 2 players on Sunday had half a sack each. They had 7 quarterback hits throughout the course of the game. Von Miller right now is non-existent. He was reflective of where I'm not saying he's declining, but the last play of the game when Mixon went on the perimeter to get the first down, essentially killing the game. Von Miller went after him. He couldn't compete, and he couldn't live up to the Von Miller. He didn't seem to have that spark that we've seen in the past. And right now, it's a very worrying trend with the Bills defensively. They just don't seem to be at the races like what we saw earlier on in the season. And did they win in Philly? Did they win? This is the NFL. We know these games can go one way or the other, but right now I'd be concerned around where this team sits because they just don't seem like the same team as old. And Denver go in there on Monday night and we'll give them a game. If Denver's defense plays at the level in which they played against the Chiefs a couple of weeks ago, don't think that game is as foregone conclusion as people may seem.
Well, Brian said there, if they win in Philly, does anyone look capable of winning in Philly at the moment, Colin? Because we saw the Eagles. Now, in fairness, they didn't do much more than really outlast the Cowboys when it came down to it, and just wait for the Cowboys to cowboy, which they duly did eventually, but not without testing Philadelphia. In some ways, funnily enough, and we'll talk about the Dolphins as well, I actually came out more impressed with the Cowboys in some ways than I expected to be, because they weren't too far off, and yet we've seen the Eagles just about outlast the Commanders for 2 games. Vikings had a shot at them, couldn't take it. The Eagles just find different ways to win. You know, they may not have motored to 8-1 the way they did last year, but they look equally difficult to beat.
Yeah, and while you like the Cowboys, they match up well against the Eagles, right? In terms of personnel and how they play. But the Cowboys really wanted this one. They really wanted it, given the division, given what happened in San Francisco, and ultimately they couldn't get it done. And yes, it was a matter of inches, but that's how football games are decided. I mean, keep going back to it. The league sets you up essentially, right, to be 8-8, and then you've got to figure out, or was 8-8, no longer. But you've got to then figure out. So you're either good or you're not. And the Eagles find a way. And Hurts, he's banged up, and the knee takes another knock. But yet, some of the passes he's throwing this season are incredible. And again, they have ways to beat you, a little bit like Baltimore. They can, beat you on the ground. They can beat you in the air, and the defense comes alive late on. The pass, the Bills, they're the opposite to the Bills. They get at you.
I wonder on the Hurts injury, and I no problem at all with the tush push. And people moan about it all the time, but that can't be an easy play to run in terms of the strain it puts on Hurts' body. Like, there's a reason the Chiefs never sneak Mahomes, because he got injured doing it.
Yeah, he did. He broke his kneecap a few years ago. Now he responded or dislocated. He was back in no time. But it makes it is, but equally like the way in which they use it. Like, look at it, the backed up again in their goal line, and they ran it
from their own 32 on the first drive, like an absolute flex from Sirianni. Yeah, we can do it, so we're going to do it.
And there just doesn't seem to be an answer to it. So ultimately, for the Cowboys, they have a Mike McCarthy problem. They have a Jerry Jones problem. They have lots of good players on both sides of the ball, but they don't find ways to win. This is the issue with the Cowboys.
Yeah, Connor, sorry, just to reflect on what you're saying about the Cowboys and how they match up well. In the fourth quarter, the Cowboys had 14 first downs. The Eagles didn't complete 1 first down in the fourth quarter, and yet the Cowboys only came out with like 6 points and missed it on a 2-point conversion. And there was 36 yards given up on a personal foul play. I think in the last drive, or the second last drive, and the Cowboys still can't navigate. Like, they won't get a better opportunity. And Pollard, for me, is key to this, because we spoke in the summer, and he was going to be the bell cow, and we spoke about the ACL injury. He's not scored a touchdown since week 1, and that was against the Giants as happened. Yeah. So he's definitely going to score this Sunday because they're playing the Giants. But all joking aside, he hasn't scored. He was supposed to be the guy McCarthy was leaning on to take over from Zeke Elliott. It's not worked.
But it was interesting, to your point, just how much the Cowboys, to what both of you said, just how much the Cowboys stressed the Eagles. I mean, they gave up 56 total yards of penalties on that final drive, which ultimately was unsuccessful. You don't do that unless you're massively under pressure. And for all the talent that the Eagles have, to your point, Colin, that the Cowboys really do actually match up well with them. Dak has looked so much better over the last couple of weeks. But you still kind of have that feeling that ultimately the Cowboys are going to do what they're going to do. They'll go on a bit of a run here. They'll take care of all the poorer teams that are around them, mop up enough results to get to the playoffs, and then get punched in the mouth by the first good team that they play, and it's back to the drawing board again. Prove us wrong, Cowboys. The Seahawks column suffered that bad loss to the Ravens, and crucially that missed an opportunity for them to leapfrog the 49ers, who were on a bye. They could have drawn level with the Lions in the playoff standings. there was no way they were going to win that game with the way it panned out. And, they've got a lot of soul searching to do afterwards, but it was also potentially costly in terms of the playoff picture from their perspective.
Yeah, but I think sometimes you just run into a team who are better than you and better on you in pretty much every phase of the ball. Now, for the Seahawks, I think what you're looking at is the next couple of games are really important, right? They have to get the win against the Commanders and against the Rams because after that, they play the 49ers, the Cowboys, the 49ers, the Eagles. I mean, wow. Talk about 4 back to back between the 24th of November and the 17th of December. That is murderous row.
Never mind wins. You'd be worried about even can you field a team after going through that blender.
Yeah, it is going to be tough. But look, I think particularly when you have to go to Seattle, they are a different beast there. They're certainly a team who at home they are much more difficult, and they probably have I know the Commanders are feisty, but like they're not going to face a defense like they have to go again back-to-back weeks against the Browns and against the Ravens. That's 2 seriously good defenses. So I think the next 2 weeks are important in terms of realigning, steadying themselves, getting things right before they face into those 4 really tough games.
The Dolphins, Brian, once again came up short. We talked about the Cowboys really wanting that one against the Eagles. The Dolphins, I'm sure, really wanted this one against the Chiefs that both of you were at in Frankfurt. And, it wasn't all bad for them. And again, kind of like I was saying about the Cowboys, they came away looking at the Dolphins actually with the newfound respect as well, particularly for what they can do defensively, because, they held the Chiefs to 14 offensive points, which is no mean feat. They eliminated Travis Kelce from the game, which kind of exposed how much work the Chiefs still have to do to hone what they have. And, it's not like they're any slouches, let's be fair, but to hone what they have into, what they're going to need to get through the playoffs later on. It's still not quite there for the Chiefs, but a lot of that was down to what the Dolphins did. Slight frustration for me, though, I've got to say, with Mike McDaniel. Sometimes he's too clever for his own good. You're sitting there. I was certainly sitting there looking at the second half. I don't know how you felt in Frankfurt going, give the ball to Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, he was dominant in the second half. I think there was one particular one I think he went for 22 yards and something. But yeah, they couldn't stop him in the second half. But yeah, he got away from that. And in particular in the last drive, I know to a certain extent they were against the clock, but it was working. He got out on the perimeter twice on that last drive, and then he got away from it. Yeah, but I thought the takeaway for me was how strong the Dolphins' defense was, and that's why I think they are it's a marquee team within this division. They held the Chiefs to 3 for 12 and 4 down throughout the course of the game, and they only allowed 4 first down completions in the second half. They essentially shut them down. The Chiefs didn't score in the second half, and if you take away the opening drive where the Chiefs came out very hot, and you take that away, the second touchdown in which the McKinnon one was off turnover, so there was short yard fields. They essentially shut them down, and then you've got a defensive touchdown. So there you're only 14 points, and if they hadn't given away those ones early on, but second half they shut the Chiefs down. For me, it was probably the stellar piece that came away from the game. And just for one, it's just not necessarily related to the game, but we've had so much talk recently of when teams are commuting and when teams are arriving. Well, the Dolphins arrived Monday. The Chiefs arrived late Thursday night. They came out hot. You would expect it to be the other way around. It wasn't to be, but certainly think the Dolphins will, rue this game in a way because how dominant we were in the second half and not getting the game into the overtime in the end, especially that particular throw from Tua at the end when it looks like he had Wilson wide open and he just left it short. That was the killer pass for him. That didn't materialize to give us overtime.
There was a couple of Tua passes, and you can see it even better when you're in the stadium across column. A couple where he missed wide open guys on vertical routes in particular. Sometimes he's too quick to get the ball out.
Yes, but I suppose the Brian highlights it's that one to Wilson. I mean, he's definitely going to have to live with that because Wilson was there, and the throw was just terrible. He got it all wrong. It's just one of those. And then at the end, obviously the snap, and it looked like they had was a Waddle open potentially when in that last play, and that's I suppose the point that would worry me is the game. Yeah, okay, they held the Chiefs, and I think the Chiefs offense. I do think that's a concern. Right, because Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid should be elevating them more than they are, and that would be a concern. And Pacheco seems to have taken a step back, but the game was there for the Dolphins.
And Mahomes isn't leaning on the easy option, and neither is Reid. They are trying to get the ball around to the guys who are there, and they're just not doing it. Rashee Rice, perhaps, did the one honourable exception to that.
Yeah, McCall Hardman coming back hasn't really worked out as yet. Now there's still time, right? And the Chiefs kind of do this a little bit, then they lull you into a false sense of security, and you've got to give them the benefit of the doubt. But until the Dolphins actually go and win a game, I don't know that you give them the benefit of the doubt, because they had two opportunities at the end to do it, and ultimately they didn't get it done.
But fair. But I think the point you're making about the Chiefs, though, is we came away from that game and you're talking more about Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed and Willie Gay and the defensive pieces that they have than you are about what's happening on offense, because all the fireworks are on the Steve Spagnuolo side of the ball right now.
Yeah, and that's without Nick Bolton. But they are immensely impressive on defense. They really are. And what was funny though was the Broncos kind of ground and pound offense is the thing that's caused that defense the most issues. But most offenses don't play that way in the NFL nowadays, except for who's that? The Baltimore Ravens. So I think the race for the number one in the AFC is key this year. I really do, because I think nobody's going to want to go into Arrowhead. That's going to be very tough. But if you've got to go into Baltimore, good luck.
Just
Brian, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just on the time of going into Baltimore, me and Colin actually had this conversation on Sunday at the game. The last three games for the Dolphins, they've kind of you could argue they have a bit of a soft schedule coming up. But the last three games of the season, Christmas Eve, they're home to the Cowboys. New Year's Eve, they're on the road in Baltimore, and then they finish with the Bills at home. I mean, we're going to find out at Christmas if this team is for real or not, because judging by the nature of the games coming up, I think they'll get a run of it now with those games.
And I'm getting way too far ahead of myself, and we're getting too ahead of ourselves to talk about Baltimore playing in the Super Bowl. But if they do get there, worth remembering, Lamar now 18-1 for his career against NFC teams. Only one loss against NFC teams so far.
Do you know who that team is? Do you know who that team is, Connor?
I was hoping you were going to tell me. I meant to look it up before we came on.
No.
Giants, is it? Got to be the Giants with a smile on your face.
Yeah. Last season to the Giants. There you go. One day is king.
Right, well, we'll talk about the teams that are hanging around I'll say kindly on the fringes of the playoff picture. A lot of these are zombies who are just waiting for the headshot that hasn't happened yet. And we got a sensational game coming up this weekend where the Jets play the Raiders. Jets could go to 5-4 with a win here, Colin. Raiders could tie up their record on 5-5, and maybe the Antonio Pierce momentum starts building. But it's kind of hard to get excited about that game.
It is. And look, the Jets, this is the frustrating piece. The Vikings lost Kirk Cousins, and they went and they solved the issue. We knew what Zach Wilson was going to be. And unless you are delusional, you knew what Zach Wilson was going to be. And no amount of Salah going to the podium and telling you he gives you the best opportunity to win games. Lies, okay? Arthur Smith, lying about his QB. It's about time we started calling out some of these head coaches, because this is what
Salah sounds like Pinocchio and Shrek these days.
Oh, my God.
It's not his worst game.
I mean, my God, imagine standing up after that and going, well, yeah, exactly. It's nowhere near his worst game. Oh my God, how low can this go? What circle of Dante's hell do we have to descend into? And I feel like, again, the rest of the roster, imagine doing the job the defense has done. and you just look, and that is your offense. You've got to get super frustrated because you've been doing your job, and you hope things were going to be better. And Aaron Rodgers went down after 4 snaps. They had opportunities to get things done. They didn't do it. And I think ultimately, I don't think they deserve to get there because they could have solved it. They could have done something. They could have given themselves a better opportunity. They have good players. They have Breece Hall. They have Garrett Wilson. It's not like they don't have weapons there, but you've got an albatross around your neck with Zach Wilson.
Brian, the team that didn't lose that crappy Monday game, the Chargers, they're now at 500 now. They do play the Lions next, and things get tricky from here. Can the Chargers navigate their way to the playoffs?
No, God, people think I'm gone off on this Chargers team again. No, not for me, because it's more so two things. I think there's stronger teams in the AFC mix right now, in terms of particularly the AFC North. And I think the inconsistencies of this Chargers team ultimately will come back to bite them. I did fancy them last night. I think we said in the show on Thursday that I thought they'd have
But defensively, they're starting to look much more locked in fairness to them. Like that fearsome, you got Khalil Mack, Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, rather, sorry, and Tuli Tuipulotu, that defensive back Gilman, who had the 2 picks, looked excellent. It's finally starting to come together on that side of the ball, just in time for the offense to slow down completely.
But who are we reflecting those games against, Connor? Like reflecting against a Jets offense that can't move the ball against anybody. And with all due respect, the Bears are not at the level of other teams in the league. And okay, they played quite well against the Cowboys, but still didn't come out the right side of that victory. I suppose this weekend is probably a true test. I think you would argue these two teams are in similar kind of paths. They've got some really strong players. They're kind of on the periphery, being a really good side if they can put it all together. But you're reflecting on who's the favourite for this game, and the Lions are the favourites to go into SoFi and win on Sunday, because that's where people see these teams. One's going in that particular direction, and people are still don't have the faith enough in the Chargers. Justin, they didn't have the greatest game offensively last night. And the column's right. You got to give your kudos to the Jets defense, which is a frustrating thing. I thought they would have played a bit better. They've got some injuries. Big test on Sunday. It'd be interesting to see how they get on. But I can't be sold them, because the head coach as well always will look from find ways to lose games that they should win.
Colin, the Colts, we wouldn't necessarily have expected them to be still hanging around, but they're 4-5 and they're not out of it yet in the AFC South.
They're not. It's credit to Shane Steichen, and what might be most impressive, and he's done many impressive things in his rookie season as head coach, but extrapolating his finger from Jim Irsay's grip when Jim Irsay was doing his war dance after the game at the weekend. If people have not seen that video, it's worth checking out. I have rarely seen a man as concerned and as determined to figure out how he can get away from his boss without it looking too bad. But Jim Irsay fortunately had his eyes closed, and Shane Steichen was able to get away. I think they have been, I really like, I've talked about it countless times. I think he is a special coach. I think ultimately they probably don't quite have it, and we've seen that they have struggled at times against teams that can score points, but they'll be feisty. And the thing is that they may end up having a say in that they could get a couple of surprise wins, because I don't think that they will go down and out at any point. I think at every single game they'll come out swinging, and so even if they lose, they're going to take some shots. And just like Buster Douglas caught Mike Tyson in Tokyo all those years ago, there will be a team.
They have that good old-fashioned berserker mojo, don't they? They really look like they will probably determine the playoff picture, even if they're out of it themselves.
They're in Frankfurt this weekend. That's an interesting one. See how they get on against the Patriots.
Brian, the Titans, again, 3-5, not quite out of it yet, and we'll see how Will Levis gets on. It's been up and down so far, but there is promise there, and certainly a lot more excitement than there was around the dying days of Ryan Tannehill, such as they very much look to be.
Yes, he played quite well on Thursday night. I think we saw him come back to slightly kind of that norm to be an NFL quarterback against a really strong Steelers defense. But he did have some nice plays, but they're not playoff material for me. They won't. Their victories are all at home. They can't seem to get over the hump when they go on the road. And I think ultimately what will come down with this season will be, in a roundabout way, is a fact-finding mission that they've probably haven't resolved the quarterback situation long term. I know it's probably a bit early for us to say that he's only played 2 games. And Colin rightly called out last week, and we spoke about it on Sunday when we were in Frankfurt. Like, his throws last week's were bombs. They weren't like precision passes to get DeAndre Hopkins. A lot of them were like, it's working. Continue to lob it up, because the Falcons secondary are greatly exposed. So I'd like to see this weekend in particular how the Bucs defense reacts to playing against him. Bearing in mind how the Bucs played against a rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud, last weekend. But I don't think the Titans are going to be in the mix come December. I think they'll get some wins at home and they'll play well, but no, not for me. I think there's better teams in that division right now, even including the Colts, and I'd put all of them in there ahead of the Titans right now.
The Bucs column, only in the NFC South can you lose 4 games in a row and still be very much in contention, which, regardless of how relatively poorly they played in recent weeks, they still very much are.
Yeah, but that's about the division, Connor. I mean, really, would you have any real belief in this Bucs team? I think it's very difficult to have any. They look, they, like, Baker Mayfield can be good at times, but like, do you trust him? Do you trust the Bucs when the rookie QB it wasn't like, and I think CJ Stroud is going to be very good. Maybe that's the moment, but surely you should, the looks that they were giving him on defense were all the same over and over and over again, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And again, when you kind of look at the wins that they have had, like, the Vikings gave them that game, right, to begin with. Like, that was crazy. The Vikings did everything they could not to win that game. They had that victory over your Bears, Connor. I don't feel we can count that much in. And they beat a Saints side who nobody seems to want to win this division, right? So the Saints clearly just decided that day that they were going to step on a few landmines themselves. But, like, where can you look at it? And yeah, they have a couple, like the game against the Titans. They can certainly compete, because you would imagine Todd Bowles should be. But then they got to go to Santa Clara to play the 49ers. They're on the road to the Colts. That could be a shootout. But then they got the Panthers, the Falcons, the Packers. Those are, like, this is the weird thing. I can't say I have belief in them. It's difficult for me to look at it and say that they will. To look at it right now, I would feel that the 7th seed is much more likely to come from the north in the NFC rather than the south.
Yeah, late run from the Bears, no doubt. Tyson Bagent's finally getting his eye in, and we'll grab that one. No bother to you, Colin. We'll make that one come true. Brian, just a word before we wrap on the primetime slate. And the game they wouldn't flex coming up is Jets Raiders. We know there's a load of Jets games sprinkled across the primetime schedule because everybody expected it to be Aaron Rodgers, but it's not, and they've still decided to stick with what looks like a bit of a futility bowl. Although we've just said that one of those teams could go to 5-4 with a win.
They don't seem to be too keen on flexing any game. I don't think they're necessarily down to this particular game and the storylines that are leading into this one. Because when the opportunity was there to be flexed, there was very little storylines around that game because Josh McDaniels was still in situ at the time, and the Jets hadn't even, they hadn't been doing anything of note. But I think the Broncos were there recently. They thought the Broncos might have been flexed out, and it wasn't. I don't know. It's other years they seem very keen to be flexing games in. Maybe they're keeping their powder dry for later on in the season where they start really moving things around. But it's a bit of an unusual one. I thought that one would have got flexed on Sunday. We might have saw Lions Chargers go in there, but not to be. But now in this game, they're probably glad to have it. It's in Vegas. Raiders have a storyline. The Jets right now are a storyline in terms of they can't do anything offensively. But it is an unusual one. It's just strange. But look, In a roundabout way, for us fans on this side of the world, it's probably better, Connor, because we don't lose the better games in our windows, which are, lead to better games and more enjoyable content.
This is very true. And Colin, the Thursday night game, again, a run since Amazon has taken on those TNF games. With no disrespect to my Bears Panthers is probably not one that's going to have a lot of neutrals tuning in.
That's a really tough sell. I really think it is. I mean, you can't imagine fireworks from the Bears. I mean, even where Badger did get the victory, it was all passes behind the line of scrimmage. The storyline, I suppose, is Frank Reich and how long will he remain there, and can Bryce Young look better and take steps. But yeah, this, I mean, it would go back to it, like the Broncos.
It'll be Cardinals, Patriots, and Giants fans all tuning in to see what the draft order is going to be. That's the only real storyline from this is draft implications.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos Colts last year, I think, to me, set the nadir for how bad primetime game can be. This could certainly approach that.
So there we go. 41-38 shootout coming your way. Fireworks on Thursday now that we've all jumped on it.
It has, but it does have, like, build it up. We'll be doing a preview tomorrow evening, which will go out Thursday morning as a podcast. So I don't want to be putting dampener on the game, which I'm going to preview tomorrow with Andrew Morgan. But it does have the nature of a kind of a shootout game. And Justin Fields is likely to play. And is that not the storyline going into this game?
I don't think he's playing in a short week. I think that would be a crazy decision.
Okay.
I think that would be rushed. But Bagent, I know it's a little bit apart from that. Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? Apart from the turnovers, he actually wasn't that bad against the Saints. They outgained the Saints, made some decent big plays. You know, if Cole Kmet was playing for a team other than the Bears, I think people would really be talking him up as a red zone target. Bears crazily, and here's a stat for you, have the 4th highest red zone efficiency in the NFL.
There you go. Unbelievable. Things are looking up. Jim, we haven't spoken with Justin Fields. I know we're going to close out the show. We haven't spoken with him in quite some time. But I had said to column last week about Daniel Jones coming back. In a way, I wanted him to come back. He's gone now, but because you want to establish, you want to have a proper opportunity to kind of recognize whether he really is the answer.
You want to know,
And the Bears right now are in the exact same predicament, because you've got 2 top 5 picks. Well, right now, depending on how your form transpires. And do you have an answer? I don't think you do. And that's the problem.
No, well, the answer is no, and it is a problem. Although, intriguingly for me, and particularly in that game against the Saints, and I was very critical of him early on in the season, I think Bagent is playing the Luke Getsy offense the way Getsy wants it to be played. And I think actually it's highlighting some of the real problems that Fields has with holding on to the ball too long, with not getting Bagent goes for throws that he can't make. He's got that Zach Wilson overconfidence. He actually goes for throws that Fields could probably make. Fields is often not taking advantage of those opportunities because he won't do the easier stuff early on in drives.
Anyway, we'll get into it on our preview show tomorrow night, which I'm looking forward to record. Really enticing.
You will indeed.
I will say on Justin Fields, I think the Bears will move on, but I think I just don't think it's worked out in Chicago. But I do think, like, Tua is an example of, you can have a guy and in the wrong system, he can look bad. But Justin Fields was taken where he was for a reason. Now, maybe you can't, he is irredeemable, but I don't see why somebody wouldn't roll the dice, because I just don't feel the Bears ever put him in the best position. And if you put him in the best position, now I'm not saying he goes on to be a superstar, but could he be a competent backup? And given what we have seen around the league this year and the amount of backups who have had to come in, is it not better that you have a guy who can come in and can, at least elevate your offense in the way in which Dobbs does?
No, I'd agree with all that. I think ultimately with Fields, unless he balls out with the 5 or 6 games that he'll play after the injury, and I and many others will wish him well with that. if you don't know, then the answer has to be no. I think you just have to move on because you need to keep that rookie window open. You can't afford to potentially pass by a generational talent. The Bears have enough bad experience with passing over quarterbacks, and they may look back yet with regret on CJ Stroud, as we mentioned earlier. I think unless you're certain, you just can't take that chance because the window is closed on that rookie contract, and they'd be better off going again, rolling the dice yet again. Anyway, that is where we leave it for Tuesday for our talking points. As Brian said, we'll be previewing the Thursday night game. We'll be back with our game picks and lots more besides too.